And I would prefer to know that you know. I would recommend that you create yourself a mentor. That's going to be they both been very involved in the past and have to be
We're going to give everybody a couple more minutes before we get started here.
Michelle, I think we're good to go ahead and start.
Okay. All right. Welcome to dealing with difficult clients. This is probably something that everybody experiences on a daily basis. You probably have been through something like this, but we are hoping today we can have a great interactive talk and maybe share some experiences on how you have dealt with different things and maybe what you're working on and things that you need to improve on. There we go. So who are our clients? So we have obviously our buyers, our sellers, our tenants, the property owner, whether it's a residential or commercial property, the homeowners within an HOA, our vendors, we have plus our service providers, board members on the HOAs, and then also the title company. So as we go today, we're going to be calling on a lot of people. So you'll stay on mute for a little bit, but just a reminder, either volunteer or we'll bring you in to help us too.
Okay, so active listening, which is probably a huge portion when you have a client that has a concern or a complaint, just making sure that when they come and they reach out to you, that you are practicing these things by really truly taking the time to understand what the client's concerns are. acknowledging what they're frustrated about, what they're wanting us to do either as an individual or as a company. So when people come in to or call you about an issue that they're having, they want to feel that they have been understood, and they want to feel that you have really taken the time to hear them out, and that you've taken the time and you truly have understood what their issue is. And the last thing that they want to do, right, is to have us interrupt them as they're trying to voice their frustrations. So some of we wanted to kind of reach out to you guys on some of the good questions that we should be asking when we have a client that reaches out that is frustrated about a situation, where we can kind of get to the bottom of, one, what was the issue, and two, what are their expectations on what we can do to help them resolve the issue. So are there common questions that you guys like to use to help gather that information so that you're truly understanding how you can help a client?
This is
And if you
Bob,
don't-
and oops, does somebody else?
No,
wanna
go ahead, Bob. Perfect.
I'll make it quick, but I have a landlord owner, and I know we've had some spaces that didn't. They went under before their lease was up, and he said to me, he kind of, when he talks to me, he acts like, well, I had a new lease come in for this place where this guy was leaving, and he was concerned about it being anything other than a 1-year lease because of the paying the commission. He says, I paid you commission for 3 years for this, and this person's only lasting a year. And I look back now, and I didn't say anything, but I got a new lease for him for 1 year with it's a national company. I mean, they would have signed a 5-year lease, so it really goes into my pocket. But I should have been communicating with him beforehand and making sure when this happens, saying, now, is this the tenant you want? Because he picks the tenants. I don't. I just bring them. He has to qualify them, and this is the problem you get into sometimes when these owners are their own landlord, or I'm sorry, property managers. Also, they're the ones that have to vet these tenants, and you don't really want to say it that way to him, but you want to communicate that to him. And I look back now, and I should have been communicating with him, and I communicate with him all the time. He calls me anytime, day or night, weekends, I answer, and I think that goes a huge way with him. But I should have been saying in the past, hey, how's it going? Anything going? And I do that all the time, and I say, well, do you want to vet you? Is there something you want to do that I can help you vet these clients? Because in the end, it's your decision. I should have been communicating that to him all along, and he wouldn't have probably come up with this way.
Right.
My response to him is just saying, hey, Gene, I'm not trying to pick your pocket. I just want to help you keep your properties full. I don't want anything that isn't owed me. But a lot of times these owners also, you have to, when you send them a commission invoice, they don't understand that if they give their tenant 3 months rent, they have to understand that, they owe you your commission check when you bring an executed lease. It's not after they get their money from when the tenant starts paying rent. I mean, they get confused as to whose money's who. It's like I don't know if I'm making myself clear on this or not, but I guess the communications, when this issue came up, I look back now, and there's some things I should have been communicating in the last several months to make him understand that he vets the clients. I bring the clients. He has to decide if he wants them, so that I shouldn't have to share the blame in his lack of vetting.
Right. And I think that brings up a good point. There's a lot of relationships where we have an opportunity to set and develop those expectations at the very beginning of the relationship. So, whether you have a buyer or a seller or a client, a tenant, an owner, you have the opportunity to have that conversation and develop the expectations of the best way to communicate and how often to communicate, and really asking the questions too on the front end of that relationship so that there's a true understanding. And I think that will also help with some of the frustrations that happen down the line where if your owner prefers to communicate via email and they want to hear a weekly update on the progress of a vacant property, then that's been set. So, if you're 3 weeks in and you haven't had any communication with the owner, well, that's on us because that communication or that expectation was set in the front end of the relationship. So I think that is an important thing to remember as you're building relationships and bringing on new clients, that is a very important conversation that you should have in the very beginning of the relationship to truly understand what your client needs, but also what you need to voice what you need from your client.
Rachel, that's very well put. In fact, the way I responded to him, and I gave up some commission on this by going with the 1 year. He says, "You're not going to like this," and I said, "No, that's fine." I said, "If that's what you want to do," but he came to me. He had another listing, and we just finished it, and it's a prime listing. So obviously, he was happy with the way I handled it. Of course, but our job, as I see it, in most jobs, is 80% communications. And the other 20% is just showing up and doing paperwork.
Right.
And
Mary, I think
it's huge. It's huge, though. I mean, that's
agreed.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Bob. What are some other questions that you guys like to ask if you have someone that has brought some concerns? What are good ways so that you truly understand what the issue is and how you can help?
I've got something.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, so I was just going to say that this is something that I used to do a long time ago, and I need to get back to it. This kind of reminded me of it. But once a person gets done expressing their issue or their problem, I've always found it a good practice to repeat it back to them, to say, just so I understand this, this, and this, or just to be sure that we're on the same page. That way, there's no miscommunication about what their issue is. It's something kind of simple. But just repeating that back to them lets them know that, one, you heard them, and two, that you're both on the same page and there's no confusion about what they're talking about. So,
Absolutely. Mary, did you have something?
Yes, and sorry, I came to the coffee shop not thinking about this. But anyway, so I apologize if it's loud. I was going to say something similar to something similar to what you just said. Is just that I have a difficult client right now. And I try to keep coming back to, I've been doing real estate long enough that I know that you have to manage your clients and listen and do, but now I'm in commercial, which is new. I'm new again, kind of. So it's a whole new learning experience, but I keep circling back to, didn't you say this was your goal? So let's stick with this goal, because he kind of starts to get this huge scope, and he's a lot like your client, Bob, where he likes to self-property manage and do the construction process himself. So he's very, very, very hands-on. So anyway, I'm still working with this, but I've been doing that a lot too, which is, okay, but didn't you say you wanted this? So if it's different, then let's change it. So I'm trying to listen, but he also, it's difficult. I was excited about this meeting.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's all.
What other questions do you guys ask or like to ask to understand what we can do to assist in the situation?
I usually ask when an issue started and who they notified. Seems like a lot of multifamily or homeowners, they'll call you with an issue weeks after it's been going on, and then go like, well, everybody's aware of this. And it's like, who's everybody? Well, this homeowner and that homeowner, like, understood, but who actually called and let us know that there was an issue going on? So sometimes it helps you get a timeline down, or understand kind of the scope of how long something's been going on if you ask those questions.
Simone, how do you deal with when you start asking those questions, which perfect, I do the same thing, when they kind of feel like you're attacking them by asking them those questions? How do you clarify that with them?
Well, I mean, I feel like again, you always have to like listen first because sometimes people just want to release whatever it is they have going on, regardless of how it comes out. So, like I just kind of worded like I'm just trying to make sure I understand just where the issue lied, or if if there was some sort of like a communication error. Usually, it's not usually on us, but you just even addressing it is like, okay, well, now that I'm aware of the situation, especially being like new to the company, it's like, well, now that I'm aware of it, I'm more than happy to take care of it. I just want to make sure I understand kind of where the communication fell so that we can get this corrected so that it never happens again. So sometimes when you're not necessarily standing on the defensive side, like, well, I'm not attempting to defend anybody or, defend the company, but we're also not taking blame either. But I'm telling you now that it's in my hands, I've got it. I'll do this moving forward. I'll handle it.
And I think sometimes too, it's okay to just ask a client what it is that they would like us to do. Sometimes they vent everything that they want to vent about. We discuss kind of a plan, but then they still don't seem completely satisfied with our response or with how we feel it should be resolved. And I think sometimes it's okay just to ask the direct question, like, what can I do to make this better? Okay,
Some things that
so
really helped me. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, John. Perfect.
So asking open-ended questions, so things that can't just be answered with a yes or a no, especially when you're dealing with someone who's hot or angry, is letting them not telling them what you can't do, but telling them what you can. Be like, hey, my water heater's out. You'd be like, well, it's in your lease. I can't do anything. Like, well, I can connect you with so and so. Would be a great strategy. And something that when someone's really, really mad is repeating when they're being a little crazy. Usually will calm them down. Is like, oh, fuck you, PJ Morgan. Well, what I heard is this. Is that what you meant? And usually that will help them realize what they're presenting as and help them calm down.
Great points.
I'll
So I
piggyback on
think,
that one.
go ahead.
I found I currently have a challenging client right now. And so he'll vent for a long time and I'll do that, what John's said, but I'll also say, I'm writing up a to-do list for me. I hear you saying these things. This is what I'm going to do. But then the piece he really likes, which maybe is just him, but me saying, I'm going to be in touch with you no later than 4 p.m. tomorrow. Even if that means I don't have an answer yet, I'll be in touch with you. And that has seemed to help. Just like a very stern timeline that I follow.
Perfect.
I have
So
one
what-
other thing
it
to add
helps-
to that. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it helps a tremendous amount if you've had good communications and you've been there for the client, because you can point that out, say, I'm always available for you. I've been responsive to you. If you can say that goes a huge ways in resolving it, because this might just be a bump in the road.
Yeah. I'll add on to what Bob just said, and then I'll circle back to my other comment. I always make it a game, if you will, to stay in front of the customer calling me. So kind of like what Caitlin's saying, like she sets a time, like I make sure that I call them before they call me. So just making sure that like they're not tracking me down to get something when they're already frustrated. But then also I have a good friend in the business, and he always said that whenever somebody gets on the phone with them and they're angry, he never uses the word no. So back to what John was saying, like literally the word no never comes out of his mouth. So you just figure out how to not have to say that, like not have to add to what they're already frustrated about. It's more of a yes, we can fix it this way, or whatever the scenario is, but challenge yourself to think about it that way. Like they don't want to hear more no's. They're already frustrated. So what if you just figured out the things you can do to help them? So take the word no out of your vocabulary in those scenarios. Okay, that's all I got.
Perfect.
Susan, just piggyback on what you said, Susan. I think it's important to not say N-O, and I also think it's important not to say K-N-O-W. No, nothing's worse than when you're talking to somebody, I think anyway, and they say, yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah,
If
great point.
you have to say it, say, I understand. I think I understand what you're saying, but don't say, I know, I know. It's almost as bad as, you know.
That's an excellent tip.
Something that we recently had a discussion, Ryan and I, with one of our friends is the word but. Anytime you hear the word but, it's usually negative. Like, so it usually can be just completely removed from the sentence and it just be the same sentence without that negative word.
Mhm.
Something I've been challenging myself to do recently.
Ryan had raised his hand, so I'm gonna.
Oh, look
I
at
love
him.
that.
I just I just wanted to say that I'm incredibly impressed how engaged everyone is, and I'm gonna make Kara and Rochelle run all my stuff going forward. That's Zoom. This is great. This is the best Zoom I've ever been on. Good work.
Okay, so so the client is either on the phone or they're in person. So let's go from the in-person standpoint. So when you have the client in front of you, it's important to make eye contact with them, make sure that you have removed distractions and that they know that they have your full attention. As they're talking through their concerns, put yourself in their shoes. Visualize what they're saying, what they're frustrated about, so that you can truly understand the frustrations behind what they're talking about. We had mentioned don't interrupt them, let them talk. Sometimes we have found that people just want to vent. They just want to tell you, like, I'm super frustrated and here's what happened. But at the end of the call, like the end of that call, that's really all they wanted. They're like, I didn't really want you to do anything. I just needed to tell you about it. And I think that it also, like, ask additional questions once they're done talking, just for any clarification. Or, sometimes I think when, we get frustrated, especially when a client gets frustrated, they may skip over important pieces that are important for us to know in order to help them resolve the issue. And then, don't be quick to judge or to, like, hurry up and defend. Like, truly come at the situation with no emotion, like not a no emotion, but don't come with strong emotions to react instantly to what they're saying. And I think that's the same thing for on the phone. So you have someone that's upset on the other line. You don't want to hurry up and instantly react and show. So if they call and they're at a 10, you need to stay level the whole time. This is one of the things that I appreciated about Zoe, is that Zoe would have someone that was upset and her tone would remain the same. She wouldn't allow herself to get to that level. And we shouldn't be raising our voices at them, and we shouldn't be basically arguing back with them. We really truly need to take the time to hear them out and to talk through a solution.
Something I want to go back to that slide real quick, or something I really challenge myself on, and I have a hard time with, but is not speaking that entire time that they came in at that 10 or 11 and letting them go. And it'll be funny because sometimes they've been going for 5 minutes and they're like, are you still there? Because they're really surprised because they're used to somebody interrupting them the entire time instead of just letting them get it out, because you're going to get a lot farther in the end. All right, it's business, not personal. I think this is probably, of all these slides, the area that all of us have a lot of work to do on. It's really hard when somebody is screaming at you or placing blame on you, or they're just out of control, to make you feel like it's personal. They're coming at you and attacking you. Sometimes, we need to tell a client what they need to hear, or what's good for them, and not what they want to hear. Sometimes it's really hard delivering bad news. And I think a lot of times we try to hide from that bad news. We tell them everything else besides what they really need to hear. They're paying us for our expertise and experience. So make sure that you are telling them what we're going to do for them. You have a plan in place and a solution instead of asking the client what we can do for them. Sometimes that's an important question, but having that plan in place ahead of time and that solution is very impressive to a client. And, you know, it's better to name the elephant in the room and just deliver that bad news to the client. What are some obstacles that in times that you've had to deliver bad news? Tell us a story.
I have a small story, I guess. Kind of like a daily thing. This is Gemma. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yep.
So I run rental applications and I process those through our for our rental properties here. And a lot of times we will have to deliver bad news to the applicant if they're denied. And that is hard because they're always like, oh, you know, I really need this house. Or some people have said, you know, I'm homeless and I need to move in somewhere. And that's really difficult because, you know, it's definitely an appeal to your emotions, but it's good to still like sympathize with the client or the applicant, but not, you know, keep your voice, like keep the reply the same, you know. We always send them a letter in the mail. It's legally required. So we'll say, you know, we're sending you a letter in the mail. You'll get information about that. And that's something that Erica taught me too. So thanks, Erica.
Gemma, what do you do when that person won't take no for an answer, or maybe they keep calling you back and keep trying to keep that communication line open in that particular scenario?
So, you know, I've had it happen where if they're originally denied, they'll try to get a cosigner and then that'll kind of counter then. They'll say, okay, that's fine. Let's try with the cosigner. And then if the cosigner is denied too, then it'll be the same. You know, you're have been denied for this reason. You're getting a letter in the mail and just repeating it. Being almost robotic, but still sincere with them is kind of the best way to go in that instance.
Thanks, Gemma.
Who else has some stories? You know, you guys have stories where you've had to tell a client that you have a
Can you
major
hear?
repair that's needed.
Can you hear
or-
me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Angela.
So my problem child property. No, I've had to deliver bad news to a particular owner a few times just about there was mold issues, and I mean it costs quite a bit to get it done. But when I delivered it to him, I made sure that I had photos of what was happening. I had estimates, just letting him know that, you know, this person that we chose to do this work is, you know, he can do the work. We've used him before, you know, and this is probably the best cost. We've had other estimates that were higher. So I think just kind of delivering it in a way where it's something that has to be done, you know, because we want to get this taken care of versus having lawsuits from people who say they got sick from mold. So just kind of explaining, you know, what needed to be done, keeping in contact with the owner about, you know, the timeline for the work and, you know, when the work was finished, and just kind of having that communication open with them.
And it wasn't so bad to name that elephant in the room, the price that was, you know, the cost of the work once you started talking to him about it, right?
No, it wasn't. And just again, sending him photos of the work. So it wasn't like, okay, we got to get this done and it costs this amount of money. But for him actually, because he's not here in Omaha, for him to actually see what it is that had to be done, the scope of work that was being done, it just made more sense than just sending an email over saying you need to spend $8,000 or whatever to get this done. But for him to be able to see what had to be done and like the things that were being done, and his thing was like, I think it's a great price, and move forward.
I think one tip too for any time you have to deliver bad news is that you are coming to them with a solution, right? And you're coming to them to give them direction. Like that is our expertise. That is what we offer, whether you're an agent on this side of it or a property manager on it. It is something where you can say, unfortunately, we have a, $10,000 job that needs to get done with plumbing, but I have already done the research. Here's 3 bids. Here's who I recommend. So it helps makes that bad news not as bad. I don't know how to say that. So it's not as bad for the owner if you're also coming with a solution and saying, okay, this happened, but I have this as a solution, or this is a direction that we can go to resolve that.
I see there's several people from the event management team on. Can anybody tell us a story about time you had to deliver bad news?
Hi. We had
Great.
a situation earlier this week where we have a client that has come in multiple times, essentially wanting to plan what they want to be a fully private event in one of our venues that is public. And so we've been trying to communicate. It sounds like the event you are trying to throw is best suited to a different venue if you want to maintain the plan, or here's how to make that plan work in this space. And it actually, through a series of interactions, had gotten very heated multiple times. So we all met together and started the conversation with asking where he was at, and then expressed where we were. He was ready to give us a check and sign a contract, and we had to say, we are not prepared to sign a contract with you at this moment unless we can agree to these terms. And we got to spend time talking through each term specifically until he understood them and where we were coming from. So it went from a pretty heated conversation to resolved. And what we left with was that our normal contract will get lots of notes added to it to make sure all of these are very well specified and everyone's agreed to it before we move forward.
Yeah, Natalie, you said one of my favorite things out of that whole scenario is knowing when to walk away. If it absolutely is not a good fit with that client and it's going to cause more problems down the road, it's time, to politely, decline on the relationship. Ryan, you had your hand up, I think. Maybe.
I did. I thought about like a bunch of stories of like having to tell people their building's on fire, or somebody died in an apartment, or the seller of the property is in jail and we're trying to figure out how to close this. Like all of those were interesting scenarios. But I think maybe what might be more impactful to share is, as the recipient often of bad news, it is something, maybe think about your audience. So I receive a lot of bad news, nature of my position. I'm a little more adept at handling it. There are times where, of course, I'm human and I might blow off the handle a little bit because it sucks to get bad news. But people who get it respond better. I always respond better when someone tells me, hey, the building is on fire and we're on site and we're putting the fire out and we called insurance and we're doing whatever. Joking about that example, but if someone does come to me in advance of delivering all of the information, I think there's a tendency to think I'll be the best equipped if I wait and assemble everything and then bring it to you. Often I'll do a little bit better if I just get a heads up of like, hey, this is coming down the pipeline. That's a problem. I'm taking these steps to gather data, information. If there's anything in particular you'd like addressed in that process, jump in and tell me. Otherwise, I'm coming back to you with some solutions and a way to move it forward. It tends to make it a little easier process to absorb versus it all just landing on someone and then forcing them to make a decision. I know it's not always decision based. Sometimes it's really just bad news just happened and there's nothing else we can do and it is what it is and then done. But so take that in a contextual way for what it's worth.
Thank you. All
Just to
right.
kind of touch on really quick what Ryan was
Yep.
just saying about getting ahead of it. So this same property where we had some more remediation done, we're kind of having a similar issue on another side. And we think it's coming from like the AC units that are on the roof. So in what Ryan was saying, like just delivering this to the owner again, like, hey, we're having another issue. It's not as bad. But also what we like to do is have all of these AC units looked at that are on the roof, and make sure, there's no leaks or get whatever leaks fixed. So I think this time when I deliver this to him, that's another, like, this is what, a solution that we can look at is we're gonna need to do this to prevent this from happening again, so that he knows these are steps that we're doing to prevent this from happening again.
Mhm. Thank you. So we're all human. We all have emotions, and like we talked about before, it's business and it's not personal. But on a daily basis, it still is where you're spending a majority of your day, as is at work and working with your clients. So we just need to remember to leave our egos at the door. If a bad scenario or a bad situation presents itself, um, taking a deep breath, thinking before you respond. Maybe you need to talk to, a coworker, a colleague, or, a manager or someone from our leadership team. Maybe you need to sit down and role play your response. You write it up, ask them to read through what you think, or just verbally sit and role play your response back to the person, if it maybe they sent you an email. Just, remember to remain professional, and try and take that emotion out of it.
And I would say too, even if you're on a phone call and you feel yourself like your emotions going high, it's okay to put that client on a brief hold. Take a minute, compose yourself, and then go back to the call.
Or if you're caught off guard, maybe you got a phone call, you're caught off guard. It's okay to, maybe you let them say what they needed to say, and then say, I apologize. I was just walking into a meeting, or I apologize. I have someone at my desk. I would like to, research this and get back to you. And so I have a better response back. So it's okay, not to always have something off of the cuff every single time.
The phrase I like to use is, I want to make sure this is a productive conversation for you. So I'm going to organize some stuff and I'm going to give you a call back.
That's a good one.
Perfect.
Reframe the concept. As an inevitable aspect of relationships, which we spend a lot of time with our clients, and we have formed relationships with them, good, bad, indifferent, whatever it is. We need to be able to see sometimes conflict can be a collaborative instead of adversarial. And when they're saying things to you, you're going to acknowledge, like John said earlier, like repeating back to them what they said, but you don't have to agree with them when they're like, you know what, Erica, I talked to her earlier and she really sucks. I don't know why you work with her, why she works at PJMRE. So you may repeat back possibly what you heard, but you're not going to say, you're right, I hate working with her, I can't believe she sits next to me, is a rough example. Present all sides of the issue. And then hopefully that both parties, after talking through the issue, can come back to a shared viewpoint of it. And I've seen a lot of people do this before, where you have a solution, but sometimes you just need to maybe, if your solutions aren't working for them, problem solve with them and see what they can come up with too as a solution on what they think would work best after you've already offered your solution. All right.
Okay, so
This is Tara's favorite.
anytime that you are working with a client, you want to make sure that as you're helping them resolve the issue, that you are not overpromising and underdelivering. So don't tell them, I'm going to follow up with you by the end of the day if you truly don't think that's realistic. Because now you have an upset client, and if we don't follow through with what we told them, that's just going to escalate that situation again. Make sure that you're giving yourself realistic timeframes on what it's going to take if you have to maybe go back to somebody in leadership, or if you have a support department that needs to do something in order to resolve the issue. You have to give it time where you can communicate to whoever within the company to try to resolve, but also give them time to fix it internally as well. So set realistic timeframes as far as when you will get back to them. It's okay when a client calls or comes in that you don't have an immediate answer for them. It's okay to hear them out, understand what they're asking you to do, and then say, okay, I need to follow up with Erica to check a few things, and I will, get back with you by Friday. When you are wrapping up that phone call or that meeting, there should be a clear understanding before you hang up or before they leave on what the next steps are. When is the next time you will be communicating or following up with them? And what is a realistic time frame that the issue can then be resolved? Of course, don't forget to follow up. So if you have something where a client needs something changed on their account ledger, and you know that, okay, I have to reach out to accounting to do that. So then you send communication to Lori to say, okay, hey, can you update this, tenant's rent? We promised to issue them a concession for the repairs that were done last month. But you should also send yourself a follow-up that if you haven't heard from Lori by the end of the day, that you're going to follow up and say, hey, I need to get back to this client. Can you let me know when that will be completed? Or if Lori says, hey, I got your email, I'll get this completed. I'll send you a follow-up once the ledger has been updated. You should also have follow-up reminders on your end as well to make sure that whoever else that you're having to get information from, that you have followed up with them to ensure you've collected that information. So I think I have a bad habit of this as well. I will send somebody an email, and then to me, it's off my plate. Well, no, not really, because if I didn't hear back from them, there's still something outstanding that I haven't got back to somebody else on. So make sure that you're setting yourself those reminders so that you're following up on things. Or if you asked a client for something in particular and you're waiting on an answer from them, you need to set yourself a follow-up reminder so that if you haven't heard back from them in a day or two, that you're following up, and it's not, weeks went by and there's been no communication and you haven't done something because you're still waiting for the client to respond.
And I'm going to give you a little trick that I have, and I shouldn't be giving this away, but let's say I promised a client that I would have something to them on Tuesday by noon, and I needed Kara to give me some follow-up information. I'm probably going to tell Kara that I need it at 4 o'clock on Monday, just to give myself that little bit of buffer in case I don't get everything in time. And then I have it in time for the client that I promised. Although Kara would have got it to me, by 10 a.m. Monday.
Okay, so you have an issue that's escalated. And at what point should you involve leadership? I think that if there are things that are out of your control as an agent, as a property manager, and you're not able to resolve it and you're waiting on someone else and you can't get resolution from another person within the organization, you need to let leadership know that. It's also a good thing if you have an upset client that you give your immediate manager or leadership a heads up. So I'll give you an example. If Anne had a tenant that was upset about a certain situation where a repair wasn't done on the home, but Anne's waiting for the homeowner to give her approval, Anne's really good about, hey, Kara, quick heads up, in case so-and-so calls, here's the situation. Because then it also allows a member, your manager or the leadership team, to be ready if that person does call and reach out. So I even do that with Ryan and Susan. If I have a homeowner that I've talked to and I think, they're going to escalate this still. They got me on the phone. They wanted to voice concerns, but they're still going to go one step ahead. Then I just send Ryan and Susan a quick little message that says, here's some background, here's what happened on this situation, so that when they get the phone call, they're ready and prepared to be able to answer some of the questions or to help them resolve the issue.
And we just want to make sure that, you know, when we're following the regular process, you would go to whoever your immediate supervisor is. But if it was a true blown out of proportion scenario, that you can come to anybody on the, you know, the leadership team if you truly needed help. I mean, you want to think about it first. I mean, could this be an email? Do I need an answer, you know, right now? Or do we have 12 hours, you know, to get back to whatever the situation is? But we just want you to all know that we're a team. And, you know, if your colleague wasn't able to help you and it's has escalated to this point and you can't get a hold of me, you could, you know, you can reach out to Kara or vice versa, or wherever you needed to go. So you have somebody just there to have your back and to support you. But when you are going to come to that person, making sure that you already have prepared, you know, your plan of resolution with them. And, you know, own your mistakes. Tell them what you could have done better. This is where it went wrong. This is what I could have done better, but this is where we are right now, and I need help. All right, some tips and tricks. How to respond to a client if you're waiting on a process internally to be completed. So we've kind of talked about this a little bit. Making sure that we are forward facing as PJ Morgan Real Estate, that it isn't, you know, Mary Real Estate, it isn't, you know, Gemma and the support department's company, that we are a company as a whole. And if you're waiting on a different department for something, just letting them know that we're, you know, we're working on it. I'm just waiting for some additional information, but not placing blame on different departments. So it wouldn't be, you know, I would have had this to you yesterday, but you know, Erica in support, she hasn't gotten back to me on, you know, on what I need, or placing the blame on some other department. This is sometimes okay and sometimes it's not okay. Copying others in an email or copying another department. If you are, probably, we can talk about some different scenarios and when it's okay and when it's not okay. But there are times you don't want to, maybe your client is asking about a accounting issue. You don't want to just loop in Lori and blindside her, where she has no context of what's going on. Maybe the better response would be, you know, I need to look into this with accounting, and then you make it a separate email to someone in accounting to get the information and then present it back to your client. Does anybody have a situation where they think it's okay or not okay?
I'm going to say something. I have done this before, because sometimes you try to save yourself some face and you're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm waiting on so-and-so. And in my mind, and I've done it, you know, before, I'm like, oh, you know, I'm going to look better and it's going to be all okay. But the last time I did this, my client was like, it was actually not my client, it was a customer. I was at the land bank. Anyway, he like wanted to talk to the board. He was like, well, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, fudge, shouldn't have done that. So, I mean, I think it starts to make it's beyond not a good precedent to do business. It starts to make your company look like they're incompetent, where you're trying to say, oh, no, we'll get it to you. We're having a little mix up. Nope. So don't do it. I'm just reiterating not to.
What's an appropriate way to add somebody into an email chain or copy them into a conversation?
I would say, like, who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Anne.
So, for instance, like at Belmead, recently we've kind of had a lot of turnover there with homeowners, and they need to stop their ACH payment. And I always tell them we need to have it in writing. We can't do it over the phone. So when they email me and say, Anne, please make sure my ACH is stopped. When I reply to that homeowner, I loop Lori in and I tell that person, okay, Jane, I've looped Lori into this email. She will get the ACH stopped. And then Lori will typically reply all that it's been completed.
So you let everyone know that you were looping someone into
yes,
into the
yep,
chain.
I put it right in the email.
Okay. Erica?
No, that's exactly what I would say. I would say it needs a formal introduction that everybody has joined the chat, and then it's basically introducing who's being included in the chat as the expert on what you're needing them for, so that way they know why they're being included into the chat too. So I know, like, I've been pulled into emails in the past because somebody's having issues with like an online portal or something, and so they're like, hey, I'm including Erica because XYZ. So I'd say that's the appropriate way to include somebody else. I'd say just for proper etiquette, if it's going to be something that's in detailed, that's going to take a lot of time to the other person that's being pulled in, maybe a separate email just kind of briefing them or perhaps asking permission ahead of time would probably be warranted, just to not send something like blindly and then just hoping that they're going to make the time for it.
Anybody have a disaster when they've done this? And what happens?
So I've seen in an email where somebody copied someone in but did not tell them. And I don't know if they checked it from their phone, but they had no idea that they were copied and actually talked ill about the person that was in the email. And I've seen board members do that, where like a homeowner was on the email and another board member copied them and them not realizing it. And then there were conversations that shouldn't have happened with that homeowner on there.
Absolutely, Karen. It especially is happening because people are doing it from their phone. They're hitting reply all, and they have no idea that so-and-so has gotten added into the conversation.
And I think too, that's also like just email etiquette in general. Like if you are copying someone, like a manager because you want them looped in because you can't, like you just want them to be aware of the situation. Okay, that's one thing. But if you are expecting the manager to comment or respond to what you're sending, that should also be something that you're indicating in your email, that you're expecting a response. It's not just I'm just seeing you as an FYI.
Yeah, and I just got one just a little bit ago from Ryan, and he sent me an email. He said, here's the situation. FYI, I'm going to loop you back into this. And so that was the next email where he was introducing me to the client and letting me know that, we're on the situation and this is what's going to happen. And one of us are going to investigate. We're going to investigate. One or both of us will get back to him. All right.
Just a really quick example I've had with actually probably a tenant that, like a difficult tenant that I may have had, and we're going back and forth through email and nothing's getting resolved. Oftentimes I will forward that email to Rochelle, and then she can kind of go through it, and then she'll give me some direction to say, okay, reply back and loop me in, so that way she's kind of got an understanding of what's going on, and then I'll reply to the tenant and say, hey, I'm looping my director Rochelle in, and kind of go from there. So then tenant knows he has me and my director in that email, and then we work together to resolve it.
Yeah, so that's kind of like the last point on here, inviting a member of the leadership team into a meeting, like you just said, an email or a call, if you feel things are escalating, maybe out of control. And then the middle two, those are, we've kind of already talked about those. that you don't always have to have immediate response, just taking a deep breath and formulating what your answer back may be.
And I think too, if you are getting an email where a client seems to be extremely frustrated, a lot of times too, because emails get interpreted so differently, like I may have meant it to be one way, but they took it a completely different way, or vice versa. I think it's better off to say, hey, would you have time to chat about this, versus the emails back and forth, because a lot of times even a 10-minute phone conversation will resolve an issue and save you 20 more emails back and forth, and risking that you guys are going to interpret what one another is saying incorrectly.
That's my 100% pet peeve. I'm like, if I can just call and get this wrapped up instead of 2 days of emails, 100%, Kara.
And I do understand there are situations that we want stuff in writing, right? So that we have that documentation. But I also think it's a good reminder that you can still call that client, have the conversation, and send a follow-up email that says, per our conversation, here's what we discussed, here's the plan, and kind of reiterate what you talked about. So you still have that written documentation that you're looking for. But also I think that helps it possibly from escalating it more than it needs to be by making that phone call and just talking through it. Or text message or whatever they're doing.
All right. Does
Okay.
anybody have any other tips or tricks, or I guess tell us about a time when you were the client and you encountered great customer service? So kind of switching it, what you've seen other businesses or do.
I would say, since we have about 5 minutes left, you guys can pick any of these 3 questions and share an experience. Brendan, do you want to pick one of the 3 questions and share an experience?
Let me see. Sorry, I'm on my phone. I gotta lean in to read these. Just some obstacles that I run into when you're trying to resolve a conflict is that if somebody's not accepting the solution you're able to provide, or they want a different solution that you're not able to offer, just really trying to work towards, explaining the why as to, like, this is my solution to the problem. Yours, I wish we could come to mutual understanding here, but this is why this has to be done a certain way. It's just sometimes, people aren't acceptant of the solution you're able to offer, and just still trying to, explain to them and hear out their concerns while still moving forward with the only way you're able to move forward. That's just an obstacle that I feel like I run into fairly frequently, but manage to, diffuse at the same time.
Okay. I think we have time for one more person.
I need water.
I'd just like to say thank you to property management. I've never been involved before, really. I mean, you manage our properties, and it's like we've had 3 people and we've loved every single one of them. Now we have a 4th and we're so excited to get to know her. I don't know. We've just had such a great experience. And so I know I hear all of these stories and it's like, oh, you're doing such a great job. Thank you for all you do. And that's all.
Very nice, Caitlin. Thank you. Am I allowed to call on someone that I think does an exceptional job with customer resolution and service?
You're 100% allowed.
John, will you give us an example? John is fantastic at this. We've listened to him on the phone. We have learned from him on the phone.
Sure. An example of what, though?
Will you tell us about a time when you had a customer that had an issue and that you were able to resolve it for them?
I'm thinking earlier today, I was talking with Rochelle. We've got a customer who recently had a space that they rent that's vacant. They weren't heating it. They had a burst pipe. It's a big ordeal. And then they had a HVAC company come out today or yesterday to fix the furnace there. And now the furnace on their other side wasn't going out. So it wasn't working. So I talked to her, I talked to the company that went out, sort of got a game plan of like, hey, I apologize, based off your lease, this is your responsibility, and this is sort of why. This are the resources that I have available that I can offer you. I'm happy to help. I think it's mostly just relating that, hey, I'm here for you. That's my job. I'm happy to help. Just making sure you're building the relationships, I think, is good.
Agree.
I don't know
I
if that was a
think
great
it's
example,
always-
but
It
No,
is,
that's
because I
perfect,
think you're
John.
always great on, even though maybe it's not, our responsibility or our problem, you're always there to offer a solution, and go above and beyond, to help that client, whomever they are.
And I think with client conflicts or issues that pop up, I think a really important thing is, and I think as a company, we do a good job of this, like we all can talk to one another and run scenarios and situations by one another. And more than likely, when you're talking to someone, they've probably had a similar scenario or situation that they can talk through with you on how they handled it or the best way they think to handle it. So I really encourage you that as things come up, involve a coworker, involve someone in leadership, involve another agent, because they are likely to be able to help one see a different side of the story. Like there are times when, I'll call up, Ann or Kat and say, here's a scenario, what do you think? And we'll just kind of talk through it before I call that tenant back or that owner back to kind of talk through a solution. So make sure that you're utilizing each other and the experiences that we all have and backgrounds that we have. And I think, we all have our strong suits and things that we bring to the table. So I definitely encourage you to utilize that throughout the entire company.
Thank you guys so much for participating.
Yes, the participation was great today. Thank you guys.
110%.
All right. Have a good day. Enjoy the weather.
Bye, guys.
All right.